Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Canadian Immigration Live Q&A. I'm here with my co-host, Alicia Backman-Beharry. How are you, Alicia?
I'm well. How are you, Mark?
I'm doing fantastic. So are you excited to get away for a little bit of a holiday with your family?
I am so excited. We have never done it before. We're driving halfway across Canada and back with the family, 2 dogs and a tiny little van, so we'll see how it goes.
So I don't know if you've really contemplated this, but how many kilometers are you planning on driving? So you're driving across and then back.
Yeah, it's a lot. We're going all the way across. So I'm in Calgary. We're going to go through Saskatchewan and then Manitoba and then almost down to the border and then through Thunder Bay and all the way around Lake Superior and then Manitoulin Island all the way down to the Bruce Peninsula and back. So
Wow. And what's the projected timeline for this excursion?
we'll see. I'm trying to do no more than about 600 kilometers a day. So
That's awesome. Very, very cool. Well, my excursion is probably going to take me up to northern Alberta, and I'm going to do that in August. And I'm going to go see an uncle that I've never really been up to see his place since I was a little kid. And I have a cousin up there, and then slide over to British Columbia and visit an old law school friend who lives in Prince George. So for me, it's definitely not quite as long as you. It's I think 10 and a half hours one way to those locations. So we're in separate directions, I guess, going on little bits of excursion, but that's the fun part of Canada. You know, what you see here in Alberta is going to be completely different than what you see on the other side of the country. And for me, even driving up northern Alberta, it's way different landscape than where, what it looks like here. So very, very cool. Very cool. Well, you guys, we're getting close. June 23rd today, and I think everybody has been anxiously anticipating the rounds of invitations resuming. First draw, July. Hopefully, we'll see an open CRS, no program specified draw. In past live Q&As, people have felt that somehow the new provisions and the new powers for the minister are going to be instituted for strategic draws. But Alicia, I don't see that happening. There's a lot of moving parts that still need to happen. And so in all likelihood, it's going to be a no program specified draw. So if you guys have not yet put your profiles in or revived them or do whatever you need to do to get in there to be eligible, now is the time to do it. And with the tiebreaker rule, we don't know what those what that's going to look like. And remember, how does the tiebreaker work? If your profile's been in longer than someone else, you're going to have a chance to get that invitation to apply before they are, if the round of invitations lands right on your CRS score. So we've been talking a lot with a lot of people about that, and we've obviously created our course and everything, all geared to getting people ready for July, and it looks like we are just about there, Alicia.
yeah.
Just about there. All right. So our live Q&A today, we've got a few little housekeeping matters to go through, but we do want to give a shout out to everybody that is tuning in. And I'm just going to pull up a few comments from the first folks here. So Jagnur says, good morning, Mark and Alicia. Bright sunny day here in Vancouver. That's nice. Excellent. Lace says that it is hot right now in Toronto. And with a little, for those who are tuning in here, you'll see that we have decided for our live Q&As not to push them out to the podcast anymore. We feel like most people are here watching them in person, and we want to keep the podcast really focused on some quality educational content. And so this is really fun, and we love doing this, and we will continue to do this and expand. But We're going to focus primarily on our main streams, which is YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, and I may jump back into Instagram. We'll see how that works. So great to see you guys here. Thesura, hello, Mark and Alicia. Nice hairstyle, Mark. Guys, do you want to know what my secret is for my hairstyle? It's getting too long to really like comb it up, and I ran out of gel. So yeah. So this is like what happens when you just like towel dry your hair and like go like this. So much to my wife's chagrin, she hates it when it takes me 2 minutes to fix my hair. Anyways, but I know, Alicia, you probably, you've got it all down pat, so it's not as big of an ordeal. So yes. So I feel like I just stepped out of a salon.
I could go on about curly hair, but that's a whole other probably live Q&A.
Yes, I remember there's this old commercial that I don't know what shampoo or whatever, and so they would shampoo their hair and put the conditioner in, and then they'd like step out, and I feel like I just stepped out of a salon, and after you step out of your own shower. So I usually will pull that one out and share it with my wife every once in a while. So there you go. That's what happens, sir, when you point out things like that. I get off on some crazy tangent. Okay. All right. This is a perfect lead in here, Alicia. We'll do some more shout outs, but I wanted to pull this up from SMN. He says, hi, any news about the Postgrad work permit extension? So Alicia, have we heard anything about that?
Just a whole bunch of people, even the lawyers across the country are saying, what do we do? Like, what is happening with the Postgrad work permit extension or the open work permit policy that they are supposed to have announced? They said it was coming in the summer. It is now officially summer, my friends.
It is.
June 21st was summer solstice, longest day of the year, and it gets dark around 10 o'clock at night here. And it is now officially summer. So we're really hoping that the minister is going to be, they've announced it, they've said it's coming, but they've not given details. All we know is that there's going to be some sort of new simplified application procedure, which always strikes a little bit of fear into my heart with new platforms and glitches and things. So I hope that that is going to be actually a simplified procedure, but we haven't heard anything about those details yet.
Yeah. And one thing I mentioned to those attending my live yesterday was the simple fact that when things are simplified, all it does is create a bunch of gray area. And when immigration tries to simplify things, it opens up a lot of potential landmines for people who are trying to read things plainly, interpret things plainly, and then realize that they misunderstood something and it results in a refusal. And the last time we went through this process with these 18-month postgrad work permits, there were a number of consults I had with people who lost out, who missed their opportunity, who had their application rejected because they did something wrong. And in the vast majority of cases, they had no clue that they were doing something wrong. They followed all the instructions. And so I vowed this time, Alicia, that I was not going to just sit passively by and just say, oh, postgrads are easy, anybody can do them. But instead, I was going to have everything queued up. And it's been sitting, you guys, for a while, queued up, waiting for the minister to make the announcement. The moment he does, do not race to submit your application. I want you to wait probably about 4 or 5 o'clock that evening. He usually tends to announce things in the morning or around noon Eastern time. I want you to hang tight because I'm going to share my top 5 insights in the evening. And I want to show you guys something right now that is queued up, waiting to go. So if you scroll down here, and this is on our Canadian Immigration Institute page, when you go down to the courses and you scroll down, you'll see that we have, obviously, next week, aside from the fact, and we'll touch on this a little bit more, the Express Entry course and Masterclass starts June 27th. If you have not registered, get in there. This sucker is filling up fast, and there is a limited number that I'm going to take. I'm not going to go crazy like the TR to PR pathway where we had 350 or 400 people. This is going to be smaller. I need to keep it smaller so that I can spend more time focusing on answering your specific questions that you have. But the Express Entry course, you can get in there and you can register right now, get access to the material, and then it starts on Monday. But what I want to share with you is, and yes, we've got tips to prepare for the July draws. Click on this link right here and leave me your email address and we will send it to you. The reason we ask about immigration consultants, because there's different offerings we have, whether you're a consultant or an individual. So definitely check that out. But right here, you can see we have our Postgrad work permit 18-month extension course. It's going to open soon. When is it going to open? As soon as Minister Fraser announces the details. And like Alicia said, we don't know if it's going to be, well, he's hinted that they're going to create some kind of a new portal, but maybe they're not. I don't know. All I know is that everything is a disaster. But you can click right here to get notified when the program is launched. You can reserve your spot. And then, and if you're like anything like me, I register for webinars all the time. And unless I get that reminder email, half the time I forget that it's happening and then I miss it. So this is a way for you to connect in. You can reserve your spot, and then we will notify you the moment that course opens up. And then, of course, last but not least, later this summer, we're going to do another spousal sponsorship course. So you can also reserve your spot for that. So these are some of the upcoming courses that we have. But I couldn't help myself with the question from SMN here. We are waiting. We are waiting. All right. Now, we do know that if I shift back here as well, like we talked about, we do know that the rounds of invitations, if you look here, and we scroll down to the last one that occurred. So that was just yesterday. Same pattern, you guys. PNP only. A small number of ITAs were issued. But if you follow the previous rounds of invitations, you will see here that every 2 weeks, they hit on it. So what does that mean? It means in 2 weeks from yesterday, probably, although they could do a PNP 2 weeks from essentially July. What would that be? If we were looking at timing in the calendar here, if we took July, that would be, July the 6th. So on the 6th, it's possible they could do another PNP. And then the 7th could be that magical date that we're all waiting for, that we're anxiously waiting for, an open, no program specified draw. So obviously it's kind of funny. I kind of chuckle a little bit because there's big news, the first week in July, they're going to resume. And I think Canada Visa did a special little, they had an interview with the minister, and well, he told me that back in February that that's what they were going to do. And aside from him saying that in the summer, they were going to release details on the Postgrad, he's been fairly consistent about what he says he's going to do and then following through. We're still waiting as well for the information on the Ukraine situation and family sponsorship. But this is going to happen, you guys. So the time for waiting and pondering and wondering what you're going to do is over. There's not a single person anymore that I don't recommend they put a profile in. Yeah. And Alicia, why do you feel it's important, like me and everybody else in the firm, that people actually submit profiles and get them in now?
Absolutely. And we talked about this last week too. It used to be that if you didn't have a good shot, if your CRS score was too low, there wasn't a lot of point in putting in a profile. It was just maybe you were paying somebody to help you do that and they were taking your money. But now, if you do have the minimum eligibility requirements for FSW or CEC, and you do have some sort of work experience that you think might be marketable, right? You have something that immigration might be looking at in the future in terms of an economic objective. Even if your CRS is slightly lower than 500 points, for example, there's a good reason to put in your profile, because now you've got the tiebreaker rule, and the longer you've had your profile there, when they hopefully do a draw that's going to be more targeted, you have a better chance at getting that ITA.
Yeah, that is the reality. And never before would I have ever advised that, Alicia. Well, I shouldn't say never before. As of February the 13th, 2021, I then started to advise that. And that, as you guys remember, was the crazy massive draw, 27,332 invitations, I think, issued. Now, in fairness, that was in Canada. But like Alicia said, with the minister having the ability to strategically target certain cohorts of people based on whatever factors he deems appropriate, everything at this stage is fair game. So there's no harm in submitting that profile. All right, let's dive into some questions here. And let's see, what do we have here? Howdy with the fancy hair. Seriously, you guys, this is what you noticed. That's actually quite funny. Okay, Mark and Alicia. Howdy with the fancy hairstyle, Mark. Okay, that's great. And Alicia. Well, Alicia has a fancy hairstyle too, you guys. All right. So this is Bree here from Humid Holly. Get all your consults in, guys. I did, and you won't regret that you did. That is very kind. I wasn't actually expecting that. Thanks, Bree. So what is Bree talking about? She's talking about the consults. So if you guys are stuck and you're wondering how to complete a part of your profile, you're not sure about your work history, whatever it might be, yes, you can go here, book a consult. And like I talked about yesterday, we recognize our consult fees are not cheap. For 25 minutes, it costs $315 for Alicia. Chanel's 189, Cedric is 231, and I'm also 315. We recognize that these fees are not cheap, but you have to appreciate, you guys, that when it comes to booking a consultation, what we can cover in 25 minutes is probably the equivalent of, well, it's probably better than the equivalent of spending 10 hours searching every forum online trying to find answers from people that you really can't trust. So take that into consideration as you're as you're considering what to do. Because remember, once you submit your profile, and if you do get an ITA and something's wrong, it is very, very difficult fixing it at the next level when you're getting ready to submit your EAPR. So thanks, Bree. Very, very kind shout out. I really, really appreciate that. Okay, CF says, why is it that some applications are taking longer to be processed by RROC? Currently, they're only issuing passport requests for certain nationalities and ignoring others. It's kind of depressing to be considered second-class applicants. So, Alicia, can you explain that this has nothing to do with whether or not you're a second-class person and more to do with just volumes?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. We were on the Canadian Bar Association National Conference, and so as part of that, we have speakers that come from the government who share some statistics about the sheer volume of applications that they're getting, the sheer number of web form inquiries that they are getting. And it's like hundreds of thousands of inquiries and applications that they are trying to triage through various systems. So the other problem, what's been happening is that they are trying to streamline things. They know GCMS it's old, it's faltering, and so they're trying to roll out application pathways through various portals. And I think there's like 16 different portals or something like that now.
Yeah.
And they are redistributing and allocating work to whichever offices around the globe have capacity. So they have immigration officers from everywhere who are working on these things. And it honestly depends upon how quickly those officers can make decisions. It doesn't necessarily depend on your nationality unless you have a passport that's expired and now you can't get something renewed from your country of origin. But generally, it's being sent all the way around the globe. So it may feel like some applicants are not having as speedy a service, but keep in mind that we have historically received some applications from certain key countries. We have certain source countries, and you can look at the volume historically of who's applying for permanent residence, who's applying from which country, and there are some countries where we just have a bigger volume than others. So maybe that is what is happening because there's just so many applicants all coming from the same source country.
And as we know, over 60% are coming from India. So if that fits, then understand that's just a reality. And there's only so many officers to process. And like Alicia said, they are trying to distribute throughout the global network. But even then, there are, it takes time to triage and move those files around as well. So, all right. Okay, next question we have here is from Stephen. And he says, hello, Mark and Alicia. In the federal skilled worker outland, waiting for draws. My wife is the primary applicant and she lives in my home country, but I work and reside in another country. Can that be a problem for our relation genuine? Well, I think the genuineness of the relationship is what Stephen's asking.
Mm-hmm. And that's a good question, Stephen, right? Because whenever you're looking at an express entry application, if it's a joint application, you guys are spouses and your wife is the principal applicant, then it is important to prove that it's still a bona fide or a genuine relationship, that you guys are legitimately married, you're in a long-term, either a common law or you're legally married spouses. And if you are common law, this is where things get a little bit more complicated because Immigration will look at how long you've lived together, and then if there's a separation in terms of living together and residing together, then you need to prove that ongoing nature to your relationship. So for sure, if you're common law, you have to have proven that you live together, continuous cohabitation for 12 months. Then you guys can live in different countries, but you have to then still show that you're maintaining that relationship long distance. How have you combined your finances? How are you relying on each other, not only financially, but also emotionally? How do you communicate with each other? But if you're legally married, it's a little bit easier to show that. You still should show something showing that you are legit still married. And if you have kids together, that's another thing that you can provide as proof of ongoing relationship.
All right, next question is from Tushant, and he says, I am an international student, and he, of course, has the 20-hour restriction. He's now getting a job where he says, I have to do full-time paid training for 3 weeks. Is that fine? Or I have to do only 20 hours?
Mm.
What do you think, Alicia? So I'm
So,
assuming it's unpaid, but does that really make a difference?
well, he said paid training for 3 weeks.
Oh, full-time paid training. Oh, good question. Yeah, yeah. Yep.
hmm So, Tashant, I would be really careful with that. So keep in mind that as it's full-time student, so if you've got a study permit and yes, you have that 20-hour per week work restriction. So look under the Regulation 186, and there's a whole bunch of subcategories. You almost have the whole alphabet there. But if you're looking at that, you do have the ability to work full-time during regularly scheduled breaks. And the good news is, I don't know what your semesters are and what kind of program you're taking, but the good news is for a lot of students right now, they're on summer break. So if you can schedule your full-time paid training to be on a regularly scheduled break, whether it's summer break or I don't know if you have another semester break that would be long enough to do 3 weeks, but try to schedule that full-time paid training for a regularly scheduled break. Take a look at your school calendar so you can prove that it's a regularly scheduled break and you're able to work full-time during those periods.
The short answer is it's better to be safe than sorry.
Mhm.
Okay, Rapudaman here says, I'm here on a travel visa. Oh, this is a common one. And I have a valid truck driving license and an LMIA for a company, presumably here in Canada. I was a medical counselor in India. Can switching professions cause a work permit to be rejected?
Yeah, it could. So, if you were working as a medical counselor and all of a sudden you're going to say, I'm applying for a work permit as a trucker, immigration is going to say, well, wait a minute, what happened with your career trajectory? So, why are you switching careers and how are you qualified to work as a trucker? Maybe you have previous trucking experience in India or overseas, but you're going to want to match up the dots for that immigration officer. So be really careful because Mark and I have discussed cases where
Yep.
this very similar scenario was held against somebody on a misrep case where the person had worked as a laborer and then all of a sudden they wanted to try to change jobs and they'd never listed their laborer work before in their prior application. And so be really careful if you came on a visitor visa and you never listed all your employment history, or you selectively listed your employment history, and now you're applying for that work permit based on an LMIA, immigration might very well have significant questions about have you misrepped? Have you given us the full story? How do you have the experience required for this job? So be super careful.
Yeah. And it's interesting too, although it's not in line with Rapudaman's direct question, when you're applying for a work permit to Canada, when you look at the knock code, the education requirements or the work requirements at the bottom, those requirements are actually applicable in the context of you applying for that work permit. So if there's some mandatory education component or work experience requirement that's associated with the knock position profile, that can be grounds for refusing the work permit. Now, the interesting thing is it doesn't apply for express entry. So if you're applying from outside Canada and you're applying to be, well, whatever the occupation is, the key is the duties aligning. And if you've performed all the activities in the lead statement and a substantial number of the main duties, then that's enough. And if your education isn't properly aligned perfectly with your work history, but you still are performing those duties, then you can make the case, subject to some you know, genuineness assessment done by an officer. If you say you're an astrophysicist and you have high school education, they're probably going to question whether or not you're actually performing the duties of an astrophysicist. But just because you don't have the education doesn't mean it's going to be disqualified as work experience, foreign work experience for the purposes of express entry. But in the case of Canadian work permits, I've seen, like Alicia said, I've seen officers not only reject because they feel you don't have the general experience to do the job, but you don't meet the minimum requirements set out in the NOC. So, and that's an LMIA based work permit. That's one that's done under the International Mobility Program. So those employer specific work permits, occupation specific, yeah, we see that happen.
And the other thing I'll add to that too is be careful if you're here on a travel visa, because if you only have visitor status in Canada, the general rule is that you are not allowed to apply for a work permit from inside Canada unless you already have a work permit. There are some very specific exemptions, and there were some public policy exemptions
Yeah.
during COVID, but the world has shifted a little bit and they're relying more and more back based on the general rule, which is visitors aren't allowed to apply direct from work permits from inside Canada. So be careful on your method of application as well.
Next question is from Sanjana, and she says, I want to travel to the US for 3 weeks to meet my brother on a visitor visa, and then move to Canada on a study permit for fall 2022. No decision yet on permanent residence, which was presumably acknowledgement of receipt was obtained in February. I think that's 2021. Can my application be negatively impacted by the travel? So I think Sanjana doesn't live in Canada. I think she's just traveling to the US to spend a few weeks with her brother before she then moves on to Canada. And so the question is, can the travel negatively affect the application?
So, I mean, as long as Sanjana, as long as you've got that US visitor visa, that's absolutely important. So you're not running into denial issues at the border. Be careful on the move to Canada, right? If you're doing a study permit application, that's still a temporary residence application. So even if you have your PR application in the queue, then be very careful that when the officer asks you, what's your intent? Are you coming to Canada permanently on that study permit? It needs to be that you are coming temporarily on the study permit and you can have a dual intent, as long as you prove it, to maintain both the temporary and the permanent resident intent. So be careful with that. That if you are coming back on a temporary application, you need to show that you have the ability to return back to your home country if and when required at the end of your study permit, even if you do have that PR application in the queue. So take a look at the dual intent provisions of Section 22 of the Act. So that's one thing. If you're traveling back and forth every time that you enter Canada, it's possible that an immigration officer will cross-examine you or ask you some more questions about what's your temporary intent, what's your plan, what are you doing here long term.
All right, I'm going to shift over here to Thesura, who is one of the Express Entry DIY course alumni. Thesura, you are the last one, my friend, and that last cohort that we did earlier this year. So he just found out that his Express Entry PR application is in review required for proof of funds due to local currency depreciation. I'm going to update my funds through a web form ASAP. Any other advice for the situation? And this is a great question, Alicia, because when, especially people that have had their applications delayed, through the FSW process and have not been able to land, that there was a time where I saw a lot of request letters that asked for evidence of settlement funds. So they wanted to see that you still had those funds you'd originally indicated a year and a half ago, 2 years ago. So Thesura, I think, has done a GCMS request and probably now has realized that it's been sent to further review just to confirm that he has those settlement funds. So you're doing exactly what you need to do, Thesura. But Alicia, any other tips or advice for Thesura in this situation?
Yeah, because what's happened, of course, is that they did update the settlement funds as of the beginning of June. So I think June 8th was the cutoff. And so we talked about that a few times on our lives, that make sure that that number has gone up a little bit. So what the required settlement funds are, take a look at your number of applicants included in your express entry. But that's gone up. And so you have to go back. Yeah, there we go. So the update must be done. So June 27th, I think, Mark,
I'll
if you
show
scroll to
you.
the top.
Yeah. So June 15th is when they had updated this site. And then
And
as of
then,
here, must be
yeah,
done no later than June 27th. So you've got time, right, to update this. But
yeah,
currency is a different discussion, right? It's
yes. Yeah, so the two things in conjunction are going to trip some people up because they've updated the funds. Plus, if you've had some currency depreciation, like there's crazy things going on in world markets right now, then it's really important that you still show that you meet the equivalent and what exchange rate you're using to try to figure out what your Canadian equivalent is. So if you've got two family members, that amount is going to be 16,570 Canadian, and you've got to go back and prove that between all of your accounts, if it's you and a spouse, you have enough money from all those sources to be able to meet that minimum settlement funds. Again, if it's your spouse's money, you'll need some sort of letter from them saying that this money is joint and it's to be used for settlement funds and it's authorized to be used as a joint pool of money. So do those exchange rate calculations really carefully.
Yeah. And often, if your currency is on the Bank of Canada currency exchange rate, not all countries are. Sometimes I will, and this is something maybe I would encourage as well, is to print off the Government of Canada's currency exchange rates and upload that together just so that they can see very easily, because that's what they use. Right? You can
Yeah.
go online and search up currency conversion through other organizations or other websites. But the Bank of Canada rates are the ones that the officers rely upon. All right. So we've got a few other people. We've got Emmanuel saying hello, Mark and Alicia. Masood's watching on the Canadian Immigration Institute Facebook page. He says, hey, joining from Moncton, New Brunswick. Lester's down in Trinidad, Tobago. He's watching from down there. Great to see him connecting in here. Okay, Joe, I'm not sure what you're asking here. He says, hey, Alicia and Mark, great to see you guys. Can you give tips on what to wear? I'll
I
be there
think
in
it's a
August.
homonym. I think he actually means like physically what to wear as clothing, but I'm
Okay.
not sure.
Okay. On what to wear. And he will be there in August. Let's see, a Speedo and a
Never,
white
never a Speedo.
and a white tank top. I'm joking, Joe. It'll be warm weather, so wear warm clothes or
No, wear cool
clothes that are
clothes for
cool.
warm weather.
See, that's why you don't ask anything unrelated to immigration when you want me to answer it. Okay. Alicia, ironically, when I grew up on the farm, maybe I shouldn't say this in the midst of a live Q&A. Who cares? One of the things I explained yesterday was this pet peeve I have with all these fancy websites and infograms and explainer videos that some firms have when you have no clue who's actually representing you. You know nothing about it. They spend a bunch of money on their marketing, advertising, and you have no clue who they are or whether they even know what they're talking about. But they got a fancy website and they've got this expensive SEO strategy and they pay Google ads, tons to get their posting up, but you know nothing about them. So I will share something now that is actually quite hilarious because I don't care what I share. But when I was young, my brothers and we lived on the farm, like we were kind of like, well, we were pretty poor is the best way of describing it. We lived off of the chickens we raised. My mom had a job as kind of a licensed practical nurse, but she didn't work very much because we were basically on the farm. And we lived a long ways from everywhere. And because we never had people come to the house and the river ran right beside our farm, we spent most of the time in our little tidy whities running around with no clothes on except our little previously white underwear, which are probably caked with mud and whatever else. And we would wade up and down the rivers, catching fish and swimming and catching frogs. And it was glorious. It was the most enjoyable time. And then when people came to visit, then they would just wonder if we were some kind of wild tribe of little children, running around. So anyways, so there you go, Joe. I recommend you don't wear that because you may have some problems at the airport, but it's open season. So there you go. Okay. Okay. Jagnor says, I got a biometric request letter, instruction letter, and the medical is passed in the TR to PR on June 7th, 2022. Then AOR on June 9th, 2022. I wonder, okay, we'll leave it at that. Eligible and background check is going in your knowledge. How much more time will it take for the TR to PR pathway? So it's moving forward like a year later for Jagnor. But what's your predictions based on the levels plans and everything, Alicia?
Maybe you'll get in this year if it seems like they're finally picking up your file, but it's possible it might be next year, right? So this is the
Yep.
problem with the TR to PR. They're only processing about 40,000 this year and 30,000 next year. So it really depends on where your application is going to fall. Yeah, the trick with the TR to PR, there were some announcements on that in terms of your status. You have an obligation to maintain your status. And so it's hard for people if you don't have, yeah, here's the levels plan. So they're looking at the TR to PR specifically, and they have lumped it under the federal economic public policy application. So there we go. They're looking at still processing, and they have a range or a target, I guess, and a high.
Yep.
So there will be some that fall into next year. So
Yep. So 40,000 for this year, and they're still reserving spot for 32,000 for 2023. So take that into consideration.
mhm,
Now,
yeah.
Alicia, it looks like your screen is just freezing up just a little bit, but we're still okay. So we'll keep soldiering forward here. So there you go, Jagnor. Hopefully that was helpful for you. Okay. Harja says, good morning, Mark and Alicia. Really helpful videos. Keep up the good work. Thank you. We really appreciate that. And Anushka says, it's good to see you. Hi, Mark and Alicia. It's always good to see you here. And it's great to see you guys coming back and being repeat followers. Like, this is where I feel like we can really build relationships with people. And it's amazing, Alicia, how many times I have a consultation. And when I get on the call, it's like I'm having a conversation with an old friend. At least from their perspective, it is. I don't know them. I've never seen them or talked to them before, but they're like, how are things going? How is your son doing down in Chile on his mission, right? And so that's the fun part, and that's what I love most about this. And then you get comments like Anushka who says, I look like a new man. Wow, a new Mark. I look like a new Mark. Wow, I'm gonna have to mix it up. Hey, this is pretty hilarious. Oh, and then Amy. Oh, nice. Why am I even posting these? Today, Mark looks like a happy schoolboy. Well, great. I am a happy schoolboy. Why am I happy? Because Express Entry is coming back to life. And as you guys know, probably 60% or more of the work that we used to do was Express Entry. Why? Because I love it. It's so much fun. I really, really enjoy it. And we're freaking good at it too. And so when people come and they connect with us and they book consults, it's awesome to be able to clarify things in ways that help people ensure their applications are going to get through safely versus missing things that you guys know how cruel it is. Immigration is just viciously cruel, and the smallest little thing can result in rejection. So that is what I love, Alicia, about all of this. So thank you guys. Okay, let's see what we have next. Mariana's watching over from Toronto. Okay, so DeBottom says, can I update my wife's score? So co-applicant in the EE profile. So I'm assuming that it's a dependent spouse. Can I update my profile score, or do I need to create a new profile?
So that's also a good question. And so, to bottom, I assume you're the primary applicant, and so your wife is the accompanying dependent. And keep in mind, and I've seen this so many times when people do consults for express entry applications, they don't realize that their spouse, if their spouse is not Canadian, you can't get points for a lot of things, right? You can't get points for your spouse's non-Canadian work experience, for example. So just be careful. If you are updating your spouse's points, then the things that you can get points for a spouse under federal skilled worker would be your spouse's language. So if your spouse's language scores have changed, then yeah, for sure, make sure to update those with the new IELTS or CELPIP results, depending on what kind of test you had done, or maybe French if you happen to have a spouse that can speak French. So make sure to update those because you can get points for your spouse's language if that has shifted and you've got a new a new profile on that. The other thing that you can get points for is your spouse's education. So if your spouse has now completed a new degree or diploma or certificate, and you have that education credential assessment that shows it's equivalent to a Canadian education credential, then for sure you can update that as well. And that is going to positively, hopefully, affect your score, which is important.
Exactly.
So yes, you can do it. You don't have to create a new profile as long as she was an accompanying dependent. Then you're just going to go in and change the applicable fields for either language or education, I'm assuming.
Perfect. All right, let's jump over to the Express Entry Law private Facebook group. And we have this listener here. The question is, hello, Mark, is it possible for a person who's living with HIV positive and on ARV treatment to apply for a study permit?
Mm. And these are tricky, tricky questions. So, and I'm not sure who it is, and Facebook user, it just says Facebook user. So
Yeah.
this is one where it would be really important to book a consult. Medical and admissibility assessments are very unique, and it's going to depend upon how much your treatment costs and looking at that in relation to what the average Canadian healthcare cost usage is over a period of 5 or 10 years.
So it's David here. This is one of the
Okay.
challenges with the Express Entry Law group. So here's the Express Entry Law private Facebook group. Because it's private, it's not easy to be able to authorize me to see who's posting the comments. So there's our live stream. So it looks like it's David Yin who asked that question.
Mhm. And you can take a look at the IRCC webpage on medical inadmissibility and take a look at the analysis that they have on there in terms of their program and operational manuals on what constitutes medical inadmissibility for excessive demand.
Mm-hmm. And in most cases, I'd recommend you guys that you book a consult so that we can chat about it. Okay. All right. Hassan says, are funds maintained in an online Payoneer account where I receive my monthly salary in US dollars okay to prove sufficient funds as opposed to a local bank in my country? So this is kind of a tricky one, but
Yeah. So the key on this is that you have to prove accessible funds. And normally immigration wants you, if you're looking at a express entry application, they're very specific about wanting you to have bank letters in the specific format signed by the bank manager showing your 6 months of your balance account. And so be very careful if this is an express entry application. So you're going to go here and look at what immigration accepts as proof of funds.
yep.
So what we accept as proof of funds, all right, the funds have to be available when you apply and when they issue the PR visa, and you have to prove to the officer that you can legally access the money to use in Canada. You can't use equity on real property as proof of settlement funds.
Yeah.
Um,
You can't
you
borrow
can't
it.
borrow the money. Yes, there you go.
Yep.
And that's what I was just reading from that next
Mm-hmm.
paragraph where it's
Yep.
legally accessible to you.
Yep.
But most of the time they want letters from, it says banks or financial institutions. So this is where you're going to be looking at your settlement
Yep.
proof of funds, and they have very specific requirements that, it's on company letterhead. So financial institutions letterhead, their contact information, and then not only what you have in terms of what your balance is, but what are your outstanding debts and liabilities. So if you have a whole bunch of credit card debt or student loan debt or other debt, they want to see that in relationship to how much you say that you have as accessible settlement funds. So it's really going to depend on whether you can show between your other bank balances and other financial institution documents. You can include it maybe as additional money, but if that's your only source, it might be a problem.
Yeah. Immigration understand the officers want things the way they want them. And when you have funds contained in a Payoneer account or kind of like PayPal or something like that, I understand why. Many countries with the currency fluctuations, just like the Sura said, currency fluctuations, they go up and down so rapidly that, one day to the next, you can be fine and then you can be below the settlement fund. So I understand why people hold them in US dollar accounts. But for the purposes of immigration, they're really quite ruthless. And unless it is clearly, like Alicia identified there, if it's coming from a financial institution, a bank or financial institution, it's pretty clear. and Payoneer account is probably not considered. And I don't know intimately what a Payoneer account is, and it probably makes sense for you to book a consult for us to look into it in detail. But I'd have serious reservations relying upon that in the course of an express entry application. I'd be very, very reluctant. All right. Okay, this is actually a follow-up from yesterday. So Catalin says, hey, Mark and Alicia, wanted to say thank you for answering yesterday to my cute question about the cruise ship work. I would have joined the call, but I had to disconnect before you got to it. Thanks for what you do. So no problem, Catalin. She basically had a spouse who worked on a cruise ship. And how do you document that work history and in the personal history? So we talked about the importance of letters of explanation. Those are the secret sauce, you guys. And that is one of the main things that I teach in my course. So with the Express Entry course that's just getting ready the master classes are going to start on Monday. There's still plenty of time for you guys to connect in and to get the assistance you need to answer questions just like this. There's templates, there's tutorials, there's everything built in there that's accessible for you. So keep that in mind. And if you go to the link below, you'll see that you can find all access to all of the courses that we have, including the Express Entry course right here, which you can click on the link to learn more about. And there is a complete breakdown. And Thesura used to be on here. We've kind of moved away from the testimonials, but maybe I'm going to throw a few more back up there. But this is a complete breakdown of all the modules and lessons, and there's over 642 minutes of on-demand access videos where I walk you through every part of it. And then we have those 4 hours of live masterclasses that start Monday through Thursday of next week. And why do we only have 4 days? Because July 1st is Canada Day. And I'm not going to be teaching a class on Canada Day. We're going to be celebrating. So there we have it. Okay, let's jump to a few more here. This next question is from Anushka again. And Anushka says, my postgrad work permit expired December 2021, and I've applied for an open work permit plus PR through the home support. Medical's passed, submitted background checks, employer docs. Should I be worried working on implied status and wondering about my application status?
Yeah, so this is something that's come up for a few of my clients over the past few months because they are so backlogged in terms of issuing those new work permits. So if you look at the processing time for an in-Canada work permit application right now, I checked last week and it was 150 days. So we're looking at, 4 or 5 months on those work permit applications. Now that home support worker category is a whole category in and of itself. So that's a little bit of a different ball of wax. But if you look at the general processing times on the work permit application from inside Canada, initial and extension, yeah, it's still 150 days
50
basically.
days.
So what's been happening is that some people's employers, especially if you have to change employers or if anything is different in your employment scenario, be very careful because if you were on a postgrad work permit, that would have been an open work permit. So maybe you're okay and you are able to change employers as long as you still comply with your home support worker parameters. But for people who may have had an employer-specific work permit, you have to be really careful to only continue to work under the same conditions as was initially authorized on your first work permit or the one that you had when you submitted your work permit extension application. So implied or maintained status, you've got to comply with those initial conditions. What's been happening sometimes is people will get back a kind of pro forma letter from immigration at the time that you submit your work permit, and it'll say, thanks, we acknowledge receipt, and then they give you an arbitrary 120 day, you're valid to work in Canada for 120 days. This is not legislation, and it's been causing a lot of confusion.
Yep.
I think they did it because some employers wanted to have proof of how an employee could continue to work, but it is causing mass confusion. So under the Immigration Refugee Protection Act and regulations, you are allowed to continue to work as long as you stay in Canada under maintained status if you submitted that extension application while your original work permit was still valid or before it was expired. But you cannot leave the country. So be very careful about staying in Canada and continuing to use those same conditions. Sometimes immigration is saying that you can send them a web form to ask them to issue another letter if it's been past 120 days from the date that you submitted your application, and they will check their system, confirm it's still in process, and issue you another letter saying, yes, it's still in process, and maybe that's what your employer wants to see. But you shouldn't have to. Legally, you still have maintained status. It just becomes a practical issue of whether your employer needs to see something in writing.
All right. I'm going to just shift to a few last kind of comments that as I was going back, understand, guys, we try to do our very best to pick out the questions that we feel are going to be the most beneficial to everyone. So if you're asking a question, you're frustrated that I'm not answering it, largely it's because the question is very, very specific and doesn't have a real large benefit to everybody that's attending and the thousands of people that watch after as a recording. So I want to pull up a few comments. So silence here. I received my passport request a few days back. Thanks for all your help, Mark. We will definitely give some applause for that. And then we have a few other comments. I'm going to try to pull some from some of the other platforms. So to hear is he wants information about Red Seal. So maybe Alicia, I'll just touch on this very quickly. To hear, I know you've asked this question in the past, and it's very, very specific, and it really is very general. So essentially in some provinces, when you're applying for a work permit, if it's a compulsory trade and you need to have trade certification, then you're not going to be able to work unless you're in that queue where you've applied through the apprenticeship board of whatever province. If it's, like I said, if it's a compulsory trade, you're going to have to go through that process, get approval to come in and start your work permit at the least, and then challenge the test after. Otherwise, you just simply can't work on a work permit in those occupations. Now, generally speaking, Red Seal is a certain level of certification that's generally accepted across many provinces. So Alberta has certain trade certifications for, say, a mechanic. But if you get your Red Seal, that Red Seal means that other provinces will also accept that work experience. Now, how does this apply to permanent applications? Well, although there has not been draws for the Federal Skilled Trade Program, that also plays a role in certification and eligibility for that program. But to hear, we could spend a whole Q&A, and our time is just about up talking about that. So that's just a general overview.
I will jump in on
please.
one aspect of that, Mark, because I have had a few people be very confused about what a certificate of qualification is. So I've had a few people who are lawyers or working through their NCA process, or I had people who are engineers who are looking about their engineering training process. They thought that when they worked through their professional accreditation, they were then eligible for extra express entry points because they thought that was a certificate of qualification. It's not. Be very careful when you're looking at the points for a certificate of qualification. What they mean is that you're looking at federal skilled trades category, and they are looking at regulated trades. And lawyers and engineers are not tradespeople because it's very specific to the NOC for trades NOCs. So just that's what that means.
Very cool. All right. Okay, I'm going to pull this one up. This is Samrat. He says, hello, Mark and Alicia. Wonderful day at Mark. Nice haircut. Seriously. Samrat is tuning in on the Canadian Immigration Institute Facebook page. It's interesting. And I know Samrat had posted this question before about problems that he had with his PR card, right? Things were kind of tied up. And so I think it was over a year, poor Samrat was waiting to get his PR card. Crazy, insane. Fortunately, I was able to track down a contact and we were able to resolve that. But yeah, now we're faced with more issues with immigration, and I've got tons of clients now. It seems like I've probably had 3 or 4 with people that have had their PR cards just delayed in issuance. And this is a product of so much greater, right? It's not just that. Everything is a disaster. And yes, they're making good progress, but Alicia, so
passports. I won't even start on the passports. Canadians can't even travel, right? We applied for a passport for my son back in April. We still don't have it. We thought maybe on our trip we might go through the US because it's a little bit faster. We're stuck now.
Yes. Yeah, I hear you. Okay, let's whip through just a few last ones. This one's an interesting one, Alicia. It's definitely one that is not of general applicability, but it's an interesting question. So, hey, Mark, what if you get denied entry at the border? Can they give you free flight back? What if you can't afford the ticket? So what are your thoughts on this, Alicia?
That's bad news. That's bad news, John. Um, I would always make sure that you have enough money in your bank account to be able to afford a flight back home. And
Yes.
from almost all applications that I can think of, you have to be able to show that you have temporary intent. If you're doing a temporary application, you usually have to show that you've got settlement funds if you're doing a permanent application. So in any scenario, they will basically make you pay for your own flight back. They're not going to cover it for free, but you're going to be basically sitting in like immigration secondary and not able to leave until you can book your own flight back. So you do not want to be in that situation.
All right, this question's from Sandeep, and Sandeep says, please have some courses for study permits as well. Yes, Sandeep, that is absolutely in the works. And for those of you who are tuning in a little bit late, remember our courses on the Canadian Immigration Institute webpage. That's CanadianImmigrationInstitute.com. You can explore all of the courses right here at the beginning. And just to reiterate that, oh, I guess I do have. Oh, look at that. I forgot. There's the SIR right there. We moved it right there. That was the best 347 I've ever spent for sure. That's awesome. I forgot that you were there, Thesaur, that we did have it, what our subscribers say. Shelly's a consultant, and she came and joined, and I love helping other practitioners, and Shrikar as well. Yeah, great graduate of the Express Entry course. So anyways, like I said, the courses themselves, you can get access to them right now, purchase them, and then Monday through Thursday, every evening from 4 to 5 p.m. Mountain Time, there'll be a masterclass where we dive really, really deep into this stuff. So click on here, register for that. If you just want some tips to help you get ready, you can click on here to get our email tips, and these are exclusive to those who request to get into this little email notification system that we have. And then you can get advised right now, get notified. You can leave your email for the Postgrad Work Permit 18-month extension course. The spousal's coming up again. Those of who are involved in Kuwait applying for that visa, it's there. The LMI 8 course is here. The PR card renewal was coming soon because we were waiting for the day when the online was released, and it now is. So watch closely, because the PR card, for those of you, most people are on here, are not going to be applying for PR card renewal. It's 5 years after you become a PR, but we were waiting on this one because they were pushing it online, and it now is online. So it's right embedded within the PR portal. They use the same system. So just a few other little updates, and you can click on the link below to get access to them. So yes, study permit will absolutely come. Okay, Bright, hey, good to see you. He says, heard the EE draws begin on July 6th. How true is it? We've covered that. It's true. The minister talked with myself in a secret meeting with the Canadian Bar Association executive back, I think it was in February, and he confirmed that they were going to start in July. So I think, yes, we can confirm, because that's the date, the first, but it could be the next day, right? It could be the 7th. PNPs could be the 6th, and then July 7th could be the open, but that's where we're targeting there, Bright. LinkedIn, person watching over on LinkedIn, he says, good to see you both. Any update on the postgrad work permit extensions? We've kind of hit on that one. And then Lakan here says, got my passport request, FSW Outland. Thanks, Mark and Alicia. So that's great news. We love it when people do that. And there's a whole bunch more here, Alicia, that I haven't gotten to. Okay, couple wrapped up, final kind of questions here. 2 last ones, and then we'll wrap it up. Okay, so Jenna Lynn says, I'm planning to get a study permit next year. My sister is a permanent resident, and my mother, tourist, are already in Canada. Is there any impact with the approval of my study permit? I'll be leaving my wife in Dubai because of work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this is one where I'd say, gentlemen, please book a consult, because if you are looking at trying to do a study permit application, especially if you are living in a country that's not your country of nationality, if you're working in a Middle Eastern country and you have family who's already in Canada, that's a few strikes against you in terms of common reasons for study permits getting refused. So it's especially hard to show temporary intent the more family members that you have in Canada. So if your sister's already a Canadian PR and your mom's already in Canada, it's going to make it harder to be able to show that you have a temporary intent on that study permit. And also, if you've been working in Dubai, but that's not your country of citizenship, that's another thing that seems to be a red flag for immigration study permit processing systems.
Mm-hmm.
So be careful on both of those.
So on our site, our Holthe immigration law site, Alicia drafted a great blog, a really fantastic blog on the top 10 reasons for a study permit refusal in Canada. And this blog post goes through exactly that. And so, ties are a huge part of what they're looking at when they're assessing these. So we'd encourage you to slide over there and take a look at that resource. And as always, this is just more free stuff for you guys to help you navigate your way through it. Okay, I'll pull this one up because this is one, Payal, that I can't answer, and I'm not sure if Alicia has an answer for this. But Payal says, can a startup visa PR be applied online? After submitting an online SUV work permit and biometrics, can I go to the border and show my documents and get a work permit stamped? So they're trying to fast track these crazy processing times that we're looking at, these 150. Any thoughts on that? I don't have an answer for that one. I don't do startup visas. The opportunity just really hasn't presented itself where I'm recommending someone do that because there's usually other options. But what are your thoughts on that, Alicia?
So Mark, I'm just trying to put the who can apply online through the PR portals link to you. I'm just sticking that in the chat right now. So only some immigration applicants can apply online. They've got them listed there. It does say that, yeah, there we go. So it does say that startup visa applicants can apply through this new online PR portal. So it does say that that's possible, but it's a whole other ball of wax to try to apply for a work permit. And so if you look at, there's another immigration webpage that says who can apply for a work permit at the port of entry. And the general rule is you are not allowed to apply for a work permit at the port of entry unless you're an American citizen, and there's other caveats with that. And generally you have to have had either an LMIA exempt category or that LMIA already has to have been approved. So the general rule is no, it's not possible to apply for a work permit at the border.
All right. Okay, well, I think that, Alicia, just about wraps it up. Binod, tuning in from LinkedIn, thanks so much. He says, great job, guys. It's very knowledgeable and helpful. Keep it up. Well, we hope that this is going to create some benefit for you guys. And obviously, we're not always able to get to everything, and we appreciate your appreciation and recognizing that we do our best, and sometimes people's questions don't get answered. But always, always remember that we will do our very best that we can to try to tackle the ones that are going to be the most benefit and that are going to really help us to amplify what we're trying to teach and educate people so that they can avoid those most common problems. And as a part of that, yes, we have our consultations, and within our firm, like I said, the Canadian Immigration Institute is really the sponsor in a way of this course, of this live streams, because it's there through the revenues that we earn through the DIY courses that we can really have time to spend doing all of this free stuff. And it's only going to expand over time. I also want to really highlight, if you have questions about certain areas, the immigration consultations that we do can be super, super beneficial in getting you on track, helping you to understand what you need to do in order to avoid the most common problems. And sometimes you're just stuck and you can spend hundreds of hours trying to find an answer, and half of the time you're just not even sure if you can trust it. And let's face it, the immigration website, sure, might be clear and plain on the surface, but there are so many layers to it, and they speak in general terms. And often your specific circumstances are the things that really cause that advice to turn one direction or another. And so we strongly encourage you to consider booking a consultation. And you've got lots of options now, you guys. Alicia and Chanel and Cedric and myself are all available, and it's really easy to book those. And you can pretty much get in to see someone almost same day. So there's no delays. And like I said, we as a firm collaborate on everything. So we talk. I was talking with Cedric just this morning on some tricky files that he was working on, and I will often post in our group that we the questions that I have and rely on Alicia's experience, because that's one of the benefits to having the firm Holthe Immigration Law, is that we can all as immigration lawyers share our experience, and then everybody benefits, including our clients. So thanks so much. Jenna Lynn says, thanks a lot, Mark and Alicia. New subscriber here. Fantastic. We love it. And that's a very, very good a good segue to tell you guys to subscribe to the YouTube channel. And if you like this stuff, then please share it. Because the more people that we can have that are connecting in, the more reach we can get, then it just justifies what we're doing here even more and more. And so there we go. And I think that basically covers everything off. One last little piece, I guess, that I will share is if you go to our website and you click on our approach, you will also see that the way that we represent our clients is just different. It's not the same. Our main priority was to be able to work lawyer with individual so that there was no middle person. And we discovered through a lot of experimentation and listening to our clients that using our collaborative review approach is absolutely the best way of doing it because it allows us to have direct contact with our clients. We work with DIYers, just like all of you who are watching this. You're really our ideal clients, those who want to do their work and do their part, but still value the assistance of an immigration lawyer, experienced counsel. And yeah, we absolutely love doing this, and it's the way that we work. So head over, check it out. And those of you who are submitting your profiles and you're like, gee, I wonder if I'm doing this right, absolutely consider booking a consultation and taking us up on our collaborative review model. And if some of you say, oh, Mark, it's just a little bit too expensive, a little bit more than I can afford, that's why we created the course. So there is something for all of you. All right. Alicia, any last minute comments? I think you're joining me next week for one last one before. No, you're not. Okay. This is it, you guys. So this is it. Alicia is, she's going to be getting ready to hit the road, but any last comments to wrap things up for us?
Yeah, I finally realized, guys, that I can see the comments too. This is the first day that I turned on comments. I didn't know I could see them. I've been relying on Mark the entire time and then pulling it up on the little tiny bar at the bottom. So now I can see some other comments. And there's a general question about medicals that I just wanted to briefly touch on because people get confused about who needs a medical exam, when you need a medical exam. So it's Steven's got a question there. I see 3 Qs. Yeah. So can you explain the procedure for medicals? We wait, what happens, and the document review. And Stephen, it really depends on what kind of application you have submitted. So on a work permit application, certain people need to have upfront medicals. If you have lived in a designated country, and there's a list on the IRCC website if you look up medicals in designated countries. So if you've lived in a designated country within the last year for more than 6 months, you'll need to have an upfront medical. If you're going to be working in a certain occupation that involves healthcare or kids or the elderly, and you need to have that condition removed on your work permit, you'll need to have an upfront medical. For express entry applications, upfront medical. For spousals, though, you don't have to have an upfront medical. So for a spousal sponsorship, then they will send you that medical instruction letter. So it really does depend on what kind of application you're making in terms of when you need that medical exam.
Yeah. And I'll also point out too that express entry has morphed and changed and twisted over time. And so when you're looking, like Alicia had indicated, just to reiterate once again, even if you're inside Canada versus outside Canada, sometimes the instructions that IRCC gives in express entry will depend on that. And but I can tell you, in every single case, I don't care what what IRCC has to say. If I've got a panel physician that's willing to do an upfront medical for express entry, whether I'm an outlander outside or inside Canada, I will do it. And, because I don't want any delay. It's going to be long enough as it is. And you've seen how long it takes for them when you get your passport request to actually turn around the visa, or when you have an ADR and they ask for updated background checks, how long it takes to actually get the passport request. Well, it's the same story with medicals. And if I can do it, I'll do it. But like Alicia said, for spouses and things like that, they actually send out the 1017 form. And so it really isn't designed for you to get your medical up front. And why is that? Because processing times are so long. And why did express entry go with upfront medicals? Because the theory was they were going to process them in 6 months, so they'd never expire. So that's kind of the world. Okay, one last one. This is from Gayatri. It says, hey, Mark and Alicia, I got my Postgrad approved after a wait of 6 months. And the worst is that they approved it using my old passport number that was canceled back in June 2021. What can I do now? This is really weird. I don't know your thoughts, Alicia, but I could care less. about if they, I don't know how they issued a postgrad work permit that wasn't linked to your current passport, because they can't theoretically issue it for longer than the current passport. But guys, we've seen tons of things messed up with IRCC, some to the benefit of you, others to your detriment, where they've made errors and, you know, you've got an application wrongly refused. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on this, Alicia, but you know, I've seen all kinds of crazy things over the last little while, and there's a lot of new officers too, right?
So to cover yourself off, just make sure that that postgrad work permit is valid for the time that you think it's valid for. So check the issue and the expiry date. And then also on the document itself, it'll have your passport number and the passport validity on there. So check to see what they put on there. And if it is the wrong one, so if they somehow put your old June 2021 passport, but they issued you a new postgrad work permit for 2022, then you'll want to send them a web form inquiry, include a copy of the work permit itself that shows that, and include a copy of your new passport, and ask that they correct the work permit document. And there's a separate form to correct a document. So yeah, just make sure your work permit is correct.
Excellent. Okay, we'll finish off with some shout outs, because we need shout outs too. I think we do. WWA says, highly appreciate your professional information, guys. Thank you. Bright says, thank you so much. DeBottom says, thanks a lot, Alicia, for answering my query. Kudos. And then Joe says, is it advisable to apply to your EE course, even if I'm just starting my study? By the way, thanks for the fashion tips. Joe, absolutely it is. And the reason is because the content, you will have access to it for life. So aside from the master classes, the reality is, as you're going through this, all of those over 10 hours of courses will be available and accessible to you for life. So you never have to worry about that. And I'll be honest, the best time to understand the process inside and out is right where you're at, when you're at the study permit stage, so that you know what to expect as you go through the process. You know how to set things up. You know how to focus on everything from how you can, you know, the courses that you take to what you do after with your postgrad work permit, and then into the future. So absolutely, it's advisable, no doubt about it. All right. Okay, Alicia, I think we have officially taken care of everything that we wanted to talk about today in the Thursday live Q&A. Thanks so much for joining me. I guess maybe I'm going to have to invite Chanel maybe next week to join me, and pull her in, and she can slide into the Thursday Q&A. And before long, Cedric didn't join me yesterday. I was on my own yesterday for the first time. But these are going to be expanding, you guys. And there's a huge demand for them. And so we will continue to do that. And at the end of the day, if you didn't get your questions answered today, every Wednesday, remember, and I think I even have, if I'm not mistaken, let's see, do I have it? No, I don't. I was going to pull up our fancy little, I wonder if I do have it here. Oh, yes, I do. Check this out. And then Thursdays is Alicia. So there you go. Nothing but fancy here. All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Appreciate everybody who's connected in. Appreciate all your comments, all the love, all the celebrations. And yeah, we'll see you again next week. Have fun, Alicia.